the successor to the Nintendo 64 is the GameCube, which released in 2001 in Japan in September and North America just 2 months later in November. It is the first Nintendo system to use discs, but still not CD-based. Instead, opting for these proprietary mini discs that are really small and you wouldn't find anywhere else. But yeah, that was Nintendo being Nintendo. And Sony's PS2 absolutely owned the generation, but kind of like the PS1 and N64's relationship, the GameCube still had plenty of exclusive titles, plenty of Mario games that gave people many reasons to buy it. So even if it wasn't wildly successful, it was successful as a Nintendo console. So my history with GameCube, with the GameCube, is actually one I can talk about, because most of the systems we've talked about on this channel, or at least in this series, are systems that I never had growing up. But I actually had a GameCube growing up. I didn't get one until after the Wii released. So the Wii released in 2006, but I think either right after its release or whenever it was, GameStop, which I had been going to a lot at the time. I don't go to GameStop ever anymore, but GameStop had used GameCubes for $30 and Melee for $15. So after we got the Wii, I was like, oh, I want a GameCube too. So it was on my Christmas wish list to get a used GameCube, which is this one that I got. This is the GameCube that I got. So for $30 and probably a $10 controller and $15 Melee, I spent a lot of time playing Melee and some other games with my brother growing up. So good history of that, but you could never get a GameCube and Melee for $45 now. You can barely get either one of them for under $75. So crazy, but yeah, I actually have some history of the GameCube. So this is exciting for me to talk about. We're going to talk about a handful of games and one other not game thing, but let's dive right into it. So the first game is Viewtiful Joe, which is a June 2003 side-scrolling beat-em-up developed by Clover Studios and published by Capcom. And if that collab sounds familiar at all, or if Clover sounds familiar, that's because it is, because Clover and Capcom are the duo that gave us the original Okami on PS2 just a few years after this game released. And this game looks so much like it. It's basically 2.5D as opposed to Okami being 3D, but the art style is just way too unique to this in Okami that the first time I booted this up for somebody, I was like, oh my god, this looks exactly like Okami, and it really, really does. So art style, 10 out of 10. It's the first game in the Viewtiful Joe series, and you play as Joe as you try to rescue your girlfriend from movie lands. And that's the premise of the first game. You love movies, you get sucked into a movie, and you have to trek through several episodes, all mostly inspired by superheroes, comics, and early Japanese TV shows that were in a similar vein. You get superpowers that turn you into Viewtiful Joe, who has Viewtiful Effects, abbreviated as VFX, which is clearly a nod to visual effects. So just all around, this is all about the entertainment. The game was rightly well received and kickstarted a very small series of 3 more games and an anime, all of which were released by the end of 2005. So this game released in 2003. It was the first one, but everything else, all its ports, all its sequels were all released by 2005. So very short-lived series and is completely dormant since then. No remakes or anything. The game would come to North America 4 months later in October 2003, but like I said, no ports, remakes, or anything like that. I'm pretty sure Viewtiful Joe's also on PS2, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, these games are stuck on their original systems. It's definitely an interesting piece of early 2000s gaming history, so I would strongly recommend finding a way to play this if you can. It's released in North America, so you can go buy it. It's a little expensive, but if it sounds interesting to you, if you like Okami's graphics, I think you'll probably end up loving Viewtiful Joe. So very cool to add this to my collection. After I saw the game for the first time, I was like, oh, I want to get that, but I knew I was never going to play it, so Japanese copy is a great way of getting it for the shelf. So anyway, Next up is a game that I am hopefully going to say correctly, so bear with me. This is Batten Kaitas Owaranai Subasa to Ushinawareta Umi. I think I got that. And this is a December 2003 card-based JRPG developed by Monolith Soft and published by Namco. So Monolith Soft is now best known for the Xenoblade Chronicles series, but they also have Xenosaga, Super Robot Tyson, and a Dragon Ball Z game on their resume, so that's pretty cool. But most interesting, however, is that I actually came across 2 versions of this game that I paid about the same for. This is the Model 0 version, and this is the Model 1 version. I can't find any differences online about them, but I'm pretty sure the Model 1 version just has, like some fixes from the Model 0, or it was just like a second release. I didn't see anything about that, but I have 2 versions of it. One is a Model 1. This one's Model 0. I'll just hold this one up. So for as obscure as it is, it did actually come to North America just under a year later, about 11 months later, as Batten Kaitas, Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean in November 2004. And it is a JRPG if I've ever heard one. So first of all, it's card-based, which now is pretty common, but back then I don't believe it was that common. The game is extremely reliant on it, and according to Wikipedia, the card factor to the game, it contributes to the plot, item management, and combat, the last of which also has elements of like collecting and poker. So like in 2025, it's like Balatro, 20 years before Balatro. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if games like this existed for its time, but it is certainly unique. You kind of control the protagonist, but you play as a guardian spirit who guides the protagonist as he attempts to avenge the death of 2 family members by traveling all over different islands. And that's the best I can do to sum up the plot. But trust me, it is a JRPG if you've ever heard one. The game didn't sell well, but it was received well, sparking a prequel 3 years later. But that didn't sell well since the Wii was like right around the corner from that prequel's release. So it pretty much killed the series until September 2023, when this game and its prequel were remastered for Switch and PC, which is at least more than Beautiful Joe could say. I didn't have a Switch right away. I didn't get a Switch until right before Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl came out. So like the Nintendo Direct that remaster was in was one of the first few Nintendo Directs I ever watched. So like I kind of remember that collection being announced, which was pretty cool. I'm sure there's a lot I'm missing about this game, but it sounds like one of the most unique titles on the system that was more or less missing out on popular RPGs. So Batten Kaitas, or at least 2 of them. If I'm mispronouncing that too, I'm taking that from somebody on Nintendo Life pronouncing it that way, so I hope I'm saying it right. Next up is another very interesting game, and that is Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, which is a June 2002 horror game developed by Silicon Knights and published by none other than Nintendo. So the game initially released in North America and then came to Japan as Eternal Darkness Manu Karita 13 Nin 4 months later in October 2002, which would have been just in time for Halloween. But it's not the same in Japan as it is here. This game would have gone crazy if it was released on Halloween in 2002. That would have been perfect. I was still dressing up for Halloween at that time. Silicon Knights is also responsible for Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain, Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, and X-Men Destiny, but that's about it. The game continued a trend by Nintendo in the early 2000s to publish games for more mature audiences after the success of the PS1 really appealed to older gamers in the late 90s. So some other games that come to mind in this trend for Nintendo would have been like Geist, some Resident Evil ports, and of course the scariest game ever, Luigi's Mansion. And it's also the first Nintendo game to be rated M, I'm pretty sure, so that's a big deal too. It's super common for horror games that the game relied on horror, obviously, but it also somewhat unique, kind of. It had effects and gameplay that were meant to envelop you into the game and also sometimes break the fourth wall, which is actually really, really cool. You choose from one of 12 characters in a third-person perspective as you engage in combat and exploration / puzzle solving But the game also has tons of branching gameplay that I think is supposed to make subsequent playthroughs unique, but I could also be misinterpreting that for just like doing things out of order, doing storylines out of order. The story itself is even more convoluted than that, with it starting by discovering a murder in the year 2000, so right around the game's release, but you hop between different times and locations, including 26 AD Persia, all through the modern day, but along the way, you hit 565, 814, 1150, 1460, 1760, 1916, and 1983, but none of those occur in order. You also end up in Cambodia, in France, and the game's original setting, Rhode Island. So this is like the third or fourth time that a game's plot has sounded absolutely fascinating to me, but it's, still kind of sad that I'll never play it since it's a horror game and I'm a scaredy cat, but you should give it a shot. Maybe I'll break the wall for this game, I don't know. So continuing the trend from the last two games, this game was also received well, but sold poorly. We're just going down the tube at this point, but that's likely the reason for its sequel being canceled. The game didn't sell well, so its sequel that was planned was canceled, but it did attempt to get a spiritual successor by the same studio called Shadow of the Eternals, but obviously never came out. So, Eternal Darkness. These games have progressively sold worse and worse, but how about a game you've never even heard of? And that is Mutsu to Nohohan, which is a July 2002 action game developed and published by Tomy. Tomy's kind of funny. They have Monopoly, Uno, Where's Waldo, American-based Japanese games, but they also have games that are licensed like Yu Yu Hakusho, Disney, Naruto games, so kind of funny and very, very widespread. So I was shocked when I searched this game up and saw that it actually had a Wikipedia page. I was like, no way this game is actually well known. But when I clicked it and only saw 3 sentences, I was like, all right, this makes more sense. So let me read directly from the page because it's just the brevity of how short its description is will make a lot of sense. Mutsu to Nohan is an action game for the GameCube released in Japan in 2002 by Tomy. The player controls a Mutsu, either a snow bunny, bear, hamster, or penguin, which swims around its kingdom. There are 12 levels, 1 for each month of the year. It received a score of 25 out of 40 from Famitsu. Fascinating. When I watched the gameplay just to get something more out of it, it actually looked pretty decent for a random game. It looks like you're just a fish swimming around a kingdom, so either that's what's actually happening, that you're literally just swimming around, or some guy on YouTube could not get out of the water for 7 hours. I don't know, man. It looks adorable. I mean, the box art looks adorable. The gameplay, it also looks adorable, but completely stuck in Japan, and as far as I know, no other games in this series, so you're never going to play it, but what the heck is this? I love it. So for the last game of the episode, we'll end the game part on a somewhat normal note, and that is Super Mario Strikers, which does not need an introduction. It is Mario Soccer. But a lot of information around it is pretty interesting. So this is a rare occurrence of a game initially releasing in Europe, not Japan, not North America, Europe, in November 2005 as Mario Smash Football. And it then came to North America just 2 weeks later in December 2005, but then took another month to get to Japan in January 2006. So rare example of a game going to Japan last, but even rarer that it was released in Europe first. So that's kind of interesting. It was obviously published by Nintendo, but the game was developed by Next Level Games, who has a decent history with Nintendo, developing Mario Strikers Charged, the Wii sequel to this game, Punch-Out on Wii, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, and 2 Metroid games on 3DS. One of them kind of seems like a soccer game, too. Luigi's Mansion 3 on Switch, and the most recent Mario Soccer on Switch, Mario Strikers Battle League. More on that in just a second, but Next Level Games is Canadian, and their first game was NHL Hits Pro in 2003. Canadian developer doing a hockey game. Very surprising, I know. But that type of game served as the gameplay basis for these more arcadey Mario Soccer games. So, it's I don't know if you could tell from the box art or if you've seen gameplay, like it's, I don't want to say violent, but definitely a little bit more brutal than like typical soccer. And yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because Next Level Games did. NHL Hits Pro was like a very arcadey hockey game to start. So that's kind of cool. Mario sports games, again, on the whole, don't really need an introduction. They're all basically power-up based versions of their parent sport. And it's basically true for this one, but at least historically, it's the last Mario game released on GameCube. So that's kind of neat too. I don't have much to say about the gameplay otherwise. But if you're watching this, give me a new Mario Baseball, please. Please, we haven't had a Mario Baseball, a full Mario Baseball since the Wii. So even if we get a port of Mario Super Sluggers, like, please, that's a Mario sports game that I need, or a completely first full Mario hockey game. That would be great too. One piece of context for me, at least, I had bought the North American version of this game about a year before I started working at the game store. I've talked about me working at the game store, but when I started working there, GameCube games were at their like height of being expensive. I paid about $60 for the game like about a year prior to working there, but when I started working there, the game was like $120 complete in box. So I remember it being super expensive, and the game ended up coming down in price after Mario Strikers Battle League was released like just a few years ago. So I thought that so Mario Strikers Battle League was received very poorly. People did not really like the Switch Mario Soccer, so I thought this game was going to go up in price. It never ended up doing so, but like, it is the Mario Soccer that started it all. So this one, a Wii one, and the Switch one, I think those are the only three. So I need Mario Baseball. But the last thing I'm going to show isn't even a game, but I went out of my way to get it. So that is the Game Boy Player Disc. So the Game Boy Player is a peripheral that released a little over a year after the GameCube's initial 2001 launch. In Japan, it released in March 2003. In North America and Europe, it released in June 2003, with Europe getting it like 4 days before we did. I don't know how that happened. But as it sounds, it allowed you to play Game Boy games on your TV, which wasn't super unheard of for Nintendo. The first thing that comes to mind would be the Super Game Boy on the Super Nintendo. That allowed you to play original Game Boy games, but this allowed you to play Game Boy games, Game Boy Color games, and Game Boy Advance games on your TV, which further cemented this relationship between the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance, in a lot of ways being symbiotic. I'll go with some games that had functionality between the two. Like, for example, the two Pokemon games on GameCube, you can transfer Pokemon into the Generation 3 game. So that's cool. You would install a Game Boy Player base, which, let me grab my GameCube here. So this little black thing at the bottom is the Game Boy Player base, and what you would do is screw that into the bottom, and you would put this disc into the system, put a game into the base, and the boot up disc was just meant to boot up into the base, boot up into the Game Boy game. So that's really cool. It failed, of course, for like some peripherals like the Game Boy camera. It failed for cheat devices. I also mentioned like a year ago that it failed on Game Boy Advance video cartridges. GBA video cartridges were just like licensed TV episodes, movies, and licensing, blah, blah, blah. Companies didn't want their movies to be put on TV in this way, so you couldn't use a GBA video cartridge, but I don't know. It's still cool. Yeah, you should just go watch that video. I think that video is kind of funny. Shameless plug, I know. I never knew that the Game Boy Player existed when I was growing up, but I would have killed to have something like it back then, and I technically don't even have it now. So my Game Boy Player is in a North American GameCube, and this, in a Nihon no Konyo Shokai episode, is the Japanese Game Boy Player disc. Now, the bases are not region locked. I can put my base on a Japanese GameCube, but like, when am I going to play my Japanese GameCube? I always have my North American one handy. So I technically don't have a complete set of it now, but I have the NTSC, or I have the base in my NTSC GameCube, and I had a friend a few years ago help me set up like using Melee as the boot up disc. I'm not going to get into that, but I have used a Game Boy Player before, just not in the intended form. Partially why I don't have a complete set is that even though the base isn't that expensive, the base is only like $20, or at least when I bought it, it was only $20. But now, the disc is what's really expensive. This Japanese disc was only like $40, but nobody could use it because nobody has a Japanese GameCube in North America. The disc and the base here in North America, though, they cost like $200 total. So I don't know. I'm gonna keep doing my my Game Boy player the roundabout way, but it was really cool to finally get a Game Boy player disc, even if it's not for the region as intended. So I'm really glad to have that. So that's everything for this episode. Like I said, GameCube, big deal for me, even though a lot of these games are not ones I would have played growing up. Definitely not Eternal Darkness. I would have been too scared. As a kid, I would not have slept if I played Eternal Darkness. But yeah, that's everything. So I hope you learned something. I hope I got everything about this game. But as always, if there's anything I missed or if there's anything I got wrong, please correct me. I would love to continue learning about these games as much as I have hopefully taught you something. So, with that said, bye.